Tell me the dynamic of your life at home growing up.
I was unlucky in the sense that I didn't have the love and guidance and mentoring of a father, but God made up for it in the fact that He gave me a mother that was filled with love, faith, passion, and filled my heart with visions and dreams and courage. But I'd be lying to say that not that having a father that abandoned me when I was an infant has not affected me throughout my entire life. In fact, the way that I do life now is as a direct result of that deficit. I didn't think that when I was younger, but then when I got older, I realized that every child, male or female, longs for a father and a mother. That's just a natural inclination. You just have this desire to, and especially a young boy wants to know a father. In my case, if my father died like a war hero, my life would have been much better because then I wouldn't have known him. And then I would just said, well, my dad was a hero in Vietnam or whatever. But my particular instance is that I had access to sending mail to him through his mother, which was my grandmother, who I only met once when I was like 6 or 7. We had her address, and I could send letters to my father through her, which I did throughout my entire childhood from the minute that I could write, but he never responded to any of them. And so what that did more damage than not having access to him at all, because what that did was it made me think that nothing I did was good enough or worthy enough to get his response. In a way, God used that to my benefit because it made me like an overachiever. I would use that achievements to prove to him that I was worthy of his love. So it worked in my benefit in terms of my life and in my career. But where it didn't work for me to this day, even at 63, I don't think I could ever extract that kind of thinking in my blood, meaning I still operate out of that wound, in the sense that I never feel that anyone would actually just really love me for me, that I didn't have to do something special and amazing and fantastic and be the best at something because of that wound of being rejected from him over and over, which was worse than, like I said, not ever knowing about him or not ever having access to him. But it just sent a message that nothing you do is good enough for me to come out from behind the Iron Curtain. Many times in life, I believe if you allow God to, He doesn't cause the pain, He doesn't cause the person to do the bad thing. But if you allow Him to work in the soil of your heart, then He will turn that into a great purpose. And that has been the purpose for most of my adult life, is to be a guy who's encouraging, uplifting, is to be that father spirit to everybody, whether people had a father or not. But that wouldn't have come out of without that injury. I met him for the first time in my entire life. I was a senior in high school, and I was kind of at that age, 17, where I just wanted to meet my dad, just really bad. I wanted to meet my dad. So the grandmother would never give us his information because that was off limits and I could never even ask. So my mother and I did a lot of research through, this was way before computers and anything, and just through government agencies. And we found out where he worked. And then one day I just cold called him. I caught him off guard and I called him, and that led to our first conversation. And it was a couple of few months before my graduation. And that led to him coming to my high school graduation. I met him the night of my high school graduation. Already pretty epic right there. And the hope in my heart was that we would start this amazing relationship and that he would make up for the things he didn't do. And ironically, my father was a drummer as well, though I was never influenced by him musically or personally. It is just kind of uncanny that I became a drummer. And interestingly enough, when I was a child, the only thing he left me when I was an infant that he accidentally left me was his set of bongos. And so there's a picture of his bongos in my stroller, dangling beneath my infant feet would be a prophetic sign of things to come, but I would have no idea. That weekend that he came for the graduation, he came over to the house where we were living, and I had my drum set up, and we both played for each other. Like I played my best stuff for him, and then he played his best stuff for me. And that was our first meeting, but it had never turned into what I had hoped it would be because he was basically a very narcissistic man, and I tried for years to really develop something with that, but it was always me reaching out to him. It was always me sending him Christmas presents and birthday presents after I met him. It was always me driving 3 or 4 hours to go visit him. And he wouldn't even put gas in the car. He wouldn't, like, what father wouldn't buy his son lunch? Or like, it was just like beyond the cheapest of cheap men I've ever met. And then I realized I had no value to him. And then after a certain period of my life in my 30s, I wrote him a letter and just said, I forgave him, but I basically told him how I felt. It was always going to be me pursuing him. One time in my entire life, I asked him to loan me some money. I was around 22 at the time, and I was in between tours and I needed some bread. And I didn't ask him for the money. I asked him to loan me like $1,500. And he gave me some sob story about it's tax time and he didn't have the money or whatever. Then I came up with an idea because I realized he plays percussion, Latin percussion. And I had these beautiful set of LP congas, like the three beautiful black glossy. They were like $5,000 I paid for them, and I only just bought them. But I needed the bread, so I knew he loved Latin music and had some old congas. And I said, "How about if I sell you my congas, the ones that I just bought for 5,000? How about if I sell them to you for 1,500?" Then suddenly he had the 1,500, and then I had to drive them all the way down from LA all the way down to like San Marcos. When I was older, I was like, "What kind of father would do that to a son he's never done anything for?"
Obviously, you went on to just have great success in music. Did you know, do you think there was something in the back of your mind at 6, 7 years old that was like, here's an avenue where I can win his love or approval? Or do you think it was simply just a genetics thing? You had it in you, he had it in him.
Yeah, I think the genes are really strong. I didn't want to play drums to like win his love or anything. I just had a love for drums right from the beginning. It was just in me. The rhythm was in me. And so I think that DNA is really, really strong. I did channel all of that hurt into positivity. That's the greatest motivation for most people to succeed is somebody rejecting you. So my story is not unique in that sense, but in my sense, it was a father who was consistently rejecting me. And that made me, and then also society was doing that too, because when we moved from Compton to Oregon, people in Oregon didn't like us. We lived in rural Oregon because my mother was Mexican and she had 7 kids and no father. So we were like these poor people that shouldn't have been there and they were racist. So I was kind of rejected not only from my father, but from just general society up through high school, especially where we lived in a rural mountain town of 13,000 people. And here's this Mexican lady, living in a car in a tent with her kids. We had neighbors that hated us so much they shot our dog to death because they hated us because we were Mexican. So I'm at a high school reunion a few years ago. It was like the 40-year high school reunion, and I see the family that's there, the ones that did all the harm. And they knew who I was, and they knew that I became famous as a drummer and all the things I had done. And I showed them more love and grace than you could ever imagine. It was like nothing. I didn't act snooty. I just like overlooked it with the love and the grace of God. But they knew, and I knew what had happened. All of that rejection in general, the father combined with like people and peers, just put a driving force in me I just drove it into like, I'm going to be somebody. I'm going to develop my gifts. I'm going to do something for God. And I probably learned that from my mother. But I never went off the rails like ever. The desperation of my childhood made me, I could either become like a total drug addict loser or I'm going to go the other way. And I never wanted to part with one nickel or 1 hour of my life that wasn't going to build something because I came from nothing and it was so dire circumstances, of survival with my family that the last thing I wanted to do was spend any money on something that would be self-destructive. I'm trying to buy records and pay for my own drum lessons, when I'm 16, 17 years old. I'm trying to save up money to go to LA to try to make it. The idea of like partying my money away to me just seemed foolish. So it never intrigued me. I never went off the rails emotionally or mentally or physically. I just always stayed the course of these visions and dreams that I had. And I invested all my time, energy, money, and effort into that. And we were a very close family, even though, there was 7 brothers and sisters and no fathers in our life. We relied on each other for everything. So you could say I had a very close family. I didn't have any uncles or aunts in my life. I had no grandparents in my life. I had no cousins in my life. I had nothing but my mother and my siblings, and that's very unusual. Most people I know Oh, my Uncle Eddie, my Aunt Janice, my grandpa, my grandma, my cousin Joey. I had no people in my life except my six siblings and my mother. And because we had fought to survive, they were there with me, and we were all fighting to make something of our lives. I've been a father now. My son is 26 and my daughter is 23. People ask me, what's been your favorite gig? And of all these different gigs, my favorite gig has been being a father because I wanted to pour into my kids what I never had. My greatest success is that I became from my children the father that I never had, and that I became to my wife the husband my mother never found. I broke the curse on all of that. I've been in my children's lives. I was praying for them 4 years before they were born. I recorded a cassette tape before my children were born, and it was a 90-minute tape of me speaking to them. And then I would play that cassette tape on my wife's belly with headphones. And while they were in being a fetus, I kept saying, God's called you for great things. We are so excited to meet you. You are going to be a world changer. And then I would read scriptures and poems, and then I would put on music, Mozart, James Brown, Earth, Wind, and Fire, pouring into them before they even came into the planet, and then I've been pouring into them ever since they were born. And my kids have turned out to be two amazing, incredible people. My daughter's 23. She lives in New York City, working, going to school full time, works out all the time. My son, third year of law school, hard worker, loves the Lord, diligent, but that was not by accident. That was for me to give them what I wished that someone would had given me. God doesn't make people do bad things. God doesn't make fathers leave their children or mothers leave their children. They do that all on their own. But he can make a way for something great to come out of that if you allow him to work in that pain. Because pain comes to all of us in different forms. And now it's a question of, are you going to become a victim or a victor? And I always chose to be a victor, not a victim.